So what is actually, yeah, what are we talking about? Well, more or less this webinar, right? I mean, we had, of course, the previous session where I explained a little bit about becoming a trainer and to understand a little bit the path towards it. And also maybe it's good to understand the ECU, especially the Female Commission, is really happy to support some of the ladies who really want to, well, become a professional trainer. And on their journey to become one, we want to be as supportive as we can be. It always started with the idea that we had some conversation. It was just after the Olympiad, and that we said that there are a lot of teams, but when it comes to the coaches, it's not very diversified. We want much more professional inclusion, which means that much more females should also try maybe to join teams, for example, to coach. And it can be also in all kinds of other areas where they can feel more strong to give lessons, to coach, and to claim their their place in I think in chess world. I think it's not only very good for the chess in itself, it makes it much more colorful, and I think also female always have their own powers and ways of supporting, and I think also this is some of the best things why we want this to happen. So one of these sessions, and that's why I'm very happy that you're all attending and enrolling for this kind of webinar, is in our structural way of seeing how we can well, support and help all the trainers who want to get there, have difficulties in their journey, or they just want to enrich their skills, their knowledge. And I think that these kind of sessions, well, hopefully provide some insights and ways. But as said, becoming a trainer and becoming a coach, as of also for me, it took a very long road. I mean, I'm already in the field for over 20 years, and I can tell you that I was enrolling for so many courses because I feel like if you want to become a trainer, if you want to be a coach, then why to think and invent everything by yourself, right? There are so many other people who can inspire you, not only chess, but also all kinds of other sports. And maybe a nice trivial pursuit question. What do you feel like is maybe one of our, at least my best inspirational moment as a trainer? So do you have any idea what it could be? Or otherwise, you can also just mention something from yourself, right? What are your inspiration moments as a trainer coach to, well, kind of enrich your knowledge, experience, ways how to do things? What are you doing? Are you all shy? This is today. This is the. Okay. In that case, I will start, but I will only start if you start talking afterwards, right? I mean, this is not the monologue I want to keep hearing here. So for me, I love the Olympiad. Why the Olympiad? And then exactly, I want always this first moments where the sporter made their achievement and they failed or they succeeded. For me, it doesn't matter actually which result they got, because after they give this interview, you immediately heard if they had a plan or not. Because the people who didn't have a plan, they always complain about something that they were not prepared for or something like this. And then I was thinking, but okay, what did you do, right? I mean, what happened in all this process? I mean, I had one judoka. She was fighting a very strong opponent, and she was prepared to have a very tough match. And after half a minute, she already achieved one of her in-between goals. And then she didn't know what to do with the rest of the time. So you're preparing for your Olympiad for 4 years, and you didn't figure out that you could succeed your performance in 30 seconds, and you don't know what to do the rest of the minute. Then I said, what kind of I mean, what were you doing in this whole 4 years, right? I mean, you're skillful, your knowledge, your experience and everything, but somehow for the best scenario, you were not prepared. That's something part of course, understanding your journey. And these kind of things are, for me, always very inspiring. Not only you have something to talk about, in kind of webinars like this, but also maybe in lessons, right? Because you always talk to persons. Persons always have their own journey, and everybody's stuck somewhere along the line in the way of how they well, I mean, how they manage something or how they didn't manage something. So okay, this was my introduction, small. So now I really would love to hear at least one or two comments on what are your other sources of inspiration which you used. Valentina, can I ask you to start?
Well, I don't know. Actually, when I'm training in Qatar, for us,
yeah,
we don't really have inspiration. I mean, for me, it's a big success even to keep the students actually for a few years. If there's especially,
I mean, so sorry, just but here it's about your inspiration, right? This is about my inspiration as a trainer, how I remain trainer. So how you keep yourself inspired. I mean, and for me, I mean, let's be honest. When we are training, the students come and go, right? In the end, how unfortunate.
but sometimes some are good, and then they suddenly just go. They do gymnastics, they do something else, and then you feel like you invested all this energy and everything, and then okay, some other activity was more interesting than chess, especially for girls. I think it's very hard to keep girls with chess. So
I think it's, to be honest, yeah, I mean, the point is with girls, we are much more precious. We don't have so many of them. So of course, when we lose one of them, of course, it will be felt much more. But I feel like, I mean, I can tell you that a lot of guys I'm also losing. And those guys, I had a guy, he became twice European champion and he stopped playing chess. Oh. I had one, he became world champion and he became a chemist. Okay, I mean, this is, and he had 2650, right? Another 2650 guy also quit chess, right? I mean, yeah. Actually, this is one of the things, and maybe some of you remember that I was talking, but one of my first moment when I really felt that chess is something for me, it was when I was playing. I was coach in Greece, and we were, well, in this kind of nice apartment, right? You have this Mediterranean area, this nice apartment, sunshine, sea, and well, everything is good and nice, right? And we were sitting there with Lamy, and we were sitting there with Jan Werle, two, of course, top grandmasters in current times, right? And Jan Werle at that moment, he was a little bit depressed because Isoria, one of his top players in his group, and he didn't want to become a professional, and he was 150 points stronger than him. And he was saying, if he already doesn't want to become a professional player, what should I do as a kind of fraction of his strength, right? And then at that moment, I was 24, it struck me. I was saying, but if I have one day and I need to figure out what I want to do, then I want to play chess. That's it. I don't care if I get money for it. If it will be my last day, I will play chess, and then that's it. So for me, that was a feeling which instantly came as an answer. And Lamy actually, sorry?
Very hard now to find people like this who really, they only want to do chess, you know?
But I mean, but in that moment, Jan Werle was doubting, and actually later on, he was still doubting quite a lot. Aaron Lamy actually agreed with me within a second as well. And you see that Lamy never left the chess world as well. And I think that's something you need to feel like chess is something for you. I mean, for me, I don't know. I feel like chess is really completing me in every sense. What I love about it is like building, is like the way how you can grow, how you can understand things.
Also beginners.
Sorry, once more?
You are teaching beginners also, or just a higher level?
All of them. I always say I train from 7 to 77, and from, let's say, the people who I mean, I have one guy, and he's with pension, and he hardly knew how the pieces move. And then we just walked through, and I'm told, for example, and I had actually, well, it was kind of yesterday, I had a group of 14 ladies, aged between 50 and 79, right?
Because the population is getting older in Europe.
Yeah, they're getting older. So I mean, imagine that this lady is 79 and she said, yeah, I don't want to sit boring at home, right? I want to do something. So teach me some proper chess. I mean, so she was really motivating me to get things done. And so I said, okay, I will try. So what we were doing is just a little bit describing. I mean, everything in chess is always connected to some part of history. I don't know if you're aware of it. Valentina, are you a little bit aware of the history of chess?
What do you mean about history of chess? Like,
well, I mean, the pieces, they didn't, and then it dropped from the air on the board, and then it was like that, right? I mean, every piece and every way how it's built is based in history, right? Are you aware of it?
I think so. Kind
you
of.
think so? You don't know?
Yeah, I think so.
Eva, do you remember something about the history of chess?
You need to unmute.
Unmute, please. Yes.
I'm doing it. I know just a story with the chess table. That one who first made the chess game, and he asked in return those how to say it. I don't speak English very often, so I don't really find the words.
Which language is more
Sorry?
preferable? Which language is more preferable?
It's okay. It's okay English. I understand. It's just that I don't speak very often, and I kind of looking for the words. No, I don't really know the history of chess pieces. I know that maybe the bishop was an elephant sometime, but nothing else.
I mean,
the Arabs, they call it elephant, the bishop.
Yeah.
Yes,
and actually you can see here that there's a lot of correlation between the Arab and the Russian language, because from the language roots, they came from Persia and Uzbekistan, they went up, right? So you see that still the words in Arab and Russian, they are similar, and Europe have a completely different way of wording, because we have our monarchy, and that's also one of the key things. So let's go through a little bit, like, because this is, in my opinion, also we are talking about how to become a chess trainer, but I think always you need to have a narrative, right? You need to speak a little bit from why you become a trainer, and then you need to tell a story, right, to the students. So I was telling this lady of 79-year-old, so what this chess is about. So I said, in general, of course, the most interesting thing, and you're teaching, we are here for the females, right? So I always say, when was the first emancipation? Nice question, right? When was the first emancipation of the women? What do you think, Tatiana, when it happened?
When they got the power in the monarchies, like the first queens that actually had something to say.
Yeah, and when was it?
Middle Ages, before America.
Exactly. So the point is that actually because the force, I mean, the people who know a little bit of Arab or Russian, they know that the fierce is an officer, right? So in beginning, the queen was not a queen, but it was like the officer executing the rules of the king, and the officer needed to stay always very close to the king. Why? Because otherwise you can't execute the orders. You need to listen to them, right? But in the time, the Queen Isabel, she was the first real royalness who became very powerful, and that was already more than 4 centuries ago, right? So already 4 centuries, we think that is only from the last decades, this emancipation. It was already 4 centuries ago. In that time, this officer became a real queen, and the queen became ruler of the chess game. Only to her mercy, the king remained in his most important point, because he was thinking, okay, it's a little bit sad if the king already is not powerful, and he is, it's not the most important thing. So that's a little bit sad, right? So let's keep him the most important thing. But of course, everybody knows that I'm the one who's ruling everything in the house and everything around, right? So that was the interesting thing. So in that time, the queen became powerful and could go every single way. The king, of course, remains weak, but the cast, and then, of course, the bishops, because it was also the Middle Ages, the bishops in general, they were the advisors, and actually the church wanted to prohibit the chess game because they think it's a gambling game, because in the Arab world, chess was normally more considered as a gambling game. So, of course, they were not thinking, well, it's not so good. And actually the bishops also didn't have a very big role. They only could go to squares, so it was also not that important. So, of course, how does it go in politics? You negotiate. So the bishops, they said, okay, if the bishops can go all the way, like we now know the bishops, then do you accept the game, right? So it was negotiating, and at some point there came some deal, and the bishops and the church more or less agreed with the increase of power of the bishops, because everything needs to resemble or represent in a proper way. All the pieces move and are based from some historical point of view. So the queen is the most powerful, goes back to Spain. The bishops goes also back to this kind of powerful Middle Ages. The knights, there are two versions of stories. And always keep in mind that when you're talking about chess, for me, it's never about telling the truth. It's always about stories, narratives, and historical points where you can even choose which story you like the most. Most of the time, I just tell all the stories just to my students, and then they can think about which story they like the most. So the knights, they have two versions. One is that the knights always have this kind of cover, right? Because they are not disturbed too much by the people or not scared of them. So that's why they can't go completely straight. That's one version. I think the other version is more likely, is that the cavalry normally walks in formations, and the formation is always moving, because that's your strategic maneuvering to outplay your opponent. And since the cavalry normally doesn't want to determine how exactly they want to maneuver, so that's why they move a little bit to the side, surprising. I like the formation story, to be honest, a little bit more, but I mean, they could be both true. Well, the rooks are, of course, the siege wagons, very straightforward, go and very powerful, of course, but they always go very, well, straightforward, like they go, and the soldiers in front. Soldiers are based on the strategy of Alexander the Great, which means that they can't withdraw. You still see that the pawns can't go back, right? And of course, unfortunately, soldiers normally tend to die. So you need to give them something in return. So that's why the promotion is also some kind of motivational way of thing, right? So the pawns, of course, not many will reach the other side, but if you do, then at least you get a medal and reward for your braveness and for the fact that you achieved a very important achievement. So also with this kind of facts, I always think, keep a little bit in mind in which kind of context you're saying these kind of things. On the other hand, I also think it's very important to understand that chess players normally tend to take away the humanity out of the game. When we are talking about strategy, it's not about the human factor in wars, which is always disastrous, bad, and everything. It's always a little bit about how to understand how things are. At least, in my opinion, that's always what I try to emphasize in the first way. Because it's about a way of understanding and actually a way of making, well, let's say, war peaceful, because we are playing with pieces. And actually, what for me is more important is that this is not a real game, but it's mainly about understanding yourself. Because chess, in a way, is also how Kasparov describes, is showing in which kind of situations you make what kind of decisions. And if you understand what kind of decisions you are making, then you also understand, well, when they're flawless and when they're good. Right? So everything what we are doing is always trying to understand yourself and how you react and how you wish to react or how you wish to improve. So when even to react already a little bit, the point from Adina about girls, I think is always you need to connect to them and try to understand how this point can benefit them or show them how it can be beneficial for them. To understand yourself, to see how it can develop yourself in a lot of good ways. But of course, I know And that's not only, well, I think in Qatar, I think it's everywhere, is there's a lot of distractions these days. There's TikTok, there's, there's Instagram, there's Snapchat, and probably a lot more. When I just look to my niece and nephew, they live in a completely different world than me. Already, I feel already old. But it's anyway, it's part of it, right? And it also makes it entertaining, but I still feel chess has also something to offer as a counterpart. I don't think we need to change chess to something like TikTok, but we have to show that exactly, because everything is already TikTok minded, YouTube minded, and everything, that chess has something very old and something very classic, because you can learn yourself. In TikTok, normally it's very hard to learn yourself, because the things are changing, right? They're only reacting, they only evoke emotions and so on. But really to understand, and also the algorithms, they manipulate what kind of content you are seeing or not. Adina, you had the question, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I was saying, I'm happy. Even my students, they look on YouTube, anything they watch with chess, I tell them it's better than not to watch anything. But now they all watch this Gotham chess. They all want, they only 2-3 years of chess, they want to all to play London system. They don't understand anything on what you have to do, but then I want to play London system. Say, what is this idea? You don't even know. Say, play an open game. At least you attack the king. In London system, is not even very clear what you have to do. How I will explain them? They came all with this.
I mean, I can assure you that how often Gotham chess comes into my lesson as one, and I always say that this guy is very nice, but always keep in mind that he's not interested in your development. He's only interested that you click on his YouTube channel, and if you do it out of enjoyment, go ahead, do it. But it's not about learning chess, not at all. And so, I mean, and what I normally do is that I'm saying, so, okay, we have this, let's say this London system, of course, very popular, and we get out, and sometimes even play knight c3. Sometimes I even show, because then I said, okay, imagine that you're coach or your boss of the company, right? And Dina, may I make the role play with you? Just you're the student. So, and then I said, okay, so what will you tell at this moment to, let's say, the queen? What will it do? How this conversation will go? So this queen goes to work, wants to do a lot of things for you. And how does conversation go? You're a boss, and what kind of instruction are you giving to the queen?
It's not the queen yet. You mean the white queen?
Yeah, the white queen. So I mean, this is your employee, right? You're the boss. You're the instructor, right? And I'm saying how this conversation goes. See, the queen walks into your building, your business, right? And she said, I really want to work for you, and I really want to do a lot of things. So how does conversation go? What do you tell her?
She can work, but she has to wait first to the bishop and the knight to go out.
Okay, that's a little bit disappointing, but can happen, right? Okay, you don't have work for the queen yet. So then let's make the talk with the rook on a1. How this conversation will go?
Yeah. Okay, she has to wait for the castle, and then she will come to life.
What kind of business are you? I mean, everybody's waiting for everybody. I mean, that doesn't seem like that's a very fun start, right? I mean, that's not the way. So let's try one more conversation. Let's imagine that we have another day, and I play c4, you play, let's say, well, something like e6, like the Queen's Gambit, right? Who hasn't seen the Queen's Gambit? Of course, everybody has seen the Queen's Gambit. So we go knight c3, knight f6. Okay, let's have the conversation now again. So what will the queen do? Can go to b3, can go to a4, right? And we have some opportunities, or c2, to attack the pawn, attack the king, maybe attack h7. And if the bishop goes out, the rook can go to c1, right, or d1 later on, and we have a normal company where everybody more or less can do something. So imagine, which of both the companies do you want to work with? In the Gotham chess company, or you want to work in this kind of company where everybody can join the party and everybody's happy and can feel appreciated? There are no plans blocking us. No, I mean, it's like an office, right? In the other one, if we have this kind of position, it's like an office where you, in front of the door, there's a plan you can't go through. There's all kinds of papers piling up, and you can't do anything. I say, you're allowed to go and work in both companies, but I know in which company I want to work. So, but feel free to work in this company if you like, to have this kind of conversations and do nothing the rest of the game because you're piled up. that's normally the way how I kind of approach it. So what can we say about the approach? Can we, what I'm trying to do mainly?
In this position, you mean? You're trying
No,
to
I mean in the way how I was trying to explain this kind of or how was my reaction to my students who like this Gotham chess, because let's be honest, Gotham chess, everybody, even my other student, which is one of my best students, he said, I really got a very nice book. I said, from whom? From Gotham chess. I said, oh my God. Okay. So of course I didn't want to disturb his big smile, and I said, okay, please enjoy the book. But of course I didn't spend any time to it, and I'm sure he didn't read it at all, because he's just, but okay, just right, it's just for
I
the
never
moment.
watched a video of him, but I know by level which opening we should teach the kids. So this is not an opening for the kids.
I know, but the point is that in the beginning of my career, I was always trying to, how to say, to be a little bit mean to the Gotham chess or something like this, and then I stopped thinking like, what I just understand is that people think about it, if you would be the queen, how would you feel in this position? If you would be the rook on A1, how would you feel in this position? And then they feel miserable and they feel bad and something, and said, so, but I can also give you a different feeling, like in this position, because I mean, if you have an incentive, then people understand what is really going on. You need to understand that the chess game is not wooden pieces and you don't care. No, it's about your friends. It's about you. Imagine that you would be that one, or you would be the other one, or would you like to work in an office like that? And you can create it. And also one of the things is that we know that, I mean, the pawn structure normally, because people are always afraid that the king will be mated, right? That's always one of the main points. Arguments are very common. So then I think, okay, imagine that I go like 2 pawns. And for me, this is always the minimum, the bare minimum for every student who wants to learn chess. And I said, of course, Carlson and maybe some of the other guys play different things, but they are in different stages of their development. You're still in the beginning stage, and as long as you don't have 2000 plus, you still need to play open chess, because it will benefit your development in best way. I'm not saying, and after that we can have another conversation, and then we can go back to quantum chess, but I'm very sure you don't want it anymore. But that's something you will see later on, right? So here also, I say, if you have this position, then, and my king is castling short, right? Because everybody's castling short. So we go here, and okay, the theory doesn't matter. But I'm saying, how will you attack my king? My king is completely safe because I have the center, right? And of course, you can wonder about the pawn. I can also play bishop e2 if I don't want any theoretical discussions, right? The pawn, d pawn can be defended. The main point is that I'm saying this pawn structure will save you. And for beginners, that's very important, because they're so scared as hell that everything goes wrong and everything. And I said, well, it's a little bit like in life, right? If you're inside your house, it looks like of course, it's the safest way, but that's also the most boring way of living. Right? I mean, always stay inside the house is not, you cannot experience anything. There's no adventure, there's nothing, right? So you want to experience and want to be capable. And I understand, I scare you a little bit, but I'm with you all along the way. I will explain every single time. Everything is something that goes wrong, we will just look at it, we will learn from it, and the next time you will do it again. Because like with children biking, or like with children learning, that's just part of it. You don't want them to sit inside in the house doing nothing. So very important with all this process and guiding is that you want to be with them and be supportive, right? And also let them feel that the pawn structure is your house. If you want to develop your skills, you always need to have first a safe house, and everything needs to be done. If you have went through some moving, or then that's one of the worst things, right? Then you don't have any time to develop yourself or to do anything, because it's very tough, right? So you have to understand that building your house, having this in order, is always the basis of every development. And for me, this is one of the key things we always need to understand and always have the conversation about. And another thing is that because I, as you can see, I will always start with a lot of rules, right? The instructions are very important. Why are in our learning instructions important? Tatjana, what do you think? why instructions are useful or important?
Well, I think first of all, they give us like a guideline, and if we are beginners and don't know anything, we can just be sure that at least that is correct, and we can experiment other things to evolve and learn. It's like a safe playground, sort of.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's also because then you always have a way to solve things, right? I mean, because there's always a way. Even if you're stuck, you can start with something. You don't have to sit and wait and hope till this enlightenment drops and you understand what to do, right? So you have just a path and you can follow it. Another thing is that I always say that in chess, the rules are not your enemy, but you're the best friend. You can make 100,000 mistakes and you play another game and rules forgive you. They will just say, I'm still the same rule as I was, because that's the good thing. And just try to follow them. And if you make a mistake, the next day I will be still there. I'm still your best friend. I'm still guiding you. I'm still helping you. So always keep in mind that all the rules are not your enemy. Like, I need to do this or I need to do that for my trainer. I said, for me, you never have to do whatever I say. I'm just like a Google translator. I'm Kaisa translator. I'm just explaining how 140 years of chess more or less came with some kind of guidelines and rules or intentions with how we want to play. And I think this is also important, because the more you try to defend yourself as an authority or something, the more they will try to attack you in some way, or you need to defend yourself. So I also think that as a trainer, I'm only saying I'm only the more or less the Google Translate. You're also not going to be angry at Google Translate. It doesn't give you the proper translation, right? Of course, I feel like I can do a proper translation, but right, it's more like you're trying to help them and guide them through this kind of way of understanding things. And in some way, I'm also quite modest in rules. And that's also maybe something very important for you to write down or to understand, is that a lot of, well, these popular YouTubers or a lot of, well, I hope I don't offend anybody, but Delamarre is also very famous of making a lot of books and writing a lot of books with general rules. I don't like general rules because normally they are not very accurate. So for me, I will give either a rule which is valid, or I don't give you a rule. So for me, this is, I don't like rules with exceptions. I always feel exceptions is the first laziness of the trainer. If there's an exception, work harder to make a better rule. So what I do, and I have several ways to solve it. So either if there's an exception, I mean, I can say there are conditions, like in science, we have conditions under which the rules are valid or not, right? So one thing where it's very important also as a trainer, if you feel like the rules are not completely true, but they're still helping, think about the conditions under which they are valid. Second, what is very important is that you try to say also when they're like their guidelines and their rules. Guidelines are more or less intentions are more how we want to play, right? We want to play forward. Why? Because it will make it easier for all your pieces to go somewhere, or it's more fun. That's not a rule, but I think you will like it much more, because I think that you want to play chess because you think it's a fun game, right? And not because you want to defend. Also, this is, by the way, one of the arguments I use quite a lot. I mean, if you want to play defensive game or a more simple game, why are you playing chess? Chess is not for simple games, right? We can play this, how you know, tic-tac-toe, or how you say this kind of easy games. If you want to play simple ones, why not to play this one? Why to choose chess? So yesterday, for example, also with this group, they said, but it's so complex. And I said, yes, but that's chess, right? I mean, if you want another one, then I have another course, but that's not this one. The chess is about this kind of, you want to, well, go into this adventure of chess, which has a lot of guidelines. They are very dynamic, but they're also quite interesting. They will change you every single way. And for me, it's always very much what I try to do is that I want to bring them into the world of adventure again, like your Columbus in the time of where you were going on the ship and you had no idea where you will end, right? That you just go on the sea, you just go and then see what's happening. And along the way, we have some guidelines which help us to stay alive, to stay on board, to stay on track. But I feel also that's something, I feel that as long you try to emphasize why it's helping them and why it's interesting to discover new things about yourself or about the game, then we are learning. That's also a little bit what we will speak later about the growth and the fixed mindset, right? The growth mindset is very important to always try to explore new things. So far, are there any other questions or remarks? Just because I said a lot, so maybe there's some things where you feel like you experience something in your own lessons. Valentina, how's your lessons going so far?
No, I was thinking.
Wait, Adina. I was telling Valentina. Sorry.
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 Okay.
I've been teaching chess for kids in schools and after schools, and yeah, as you said, they enjoy chess pretty much because of fun. Like they want only to play. They don't follow rules, even if I tell them pretty often. And as a remark, I really liked about the associations between life and the game and the rules, and I think they are pretty important, especially in this age of the kids.
Yeah.
The associations, and I was thinking, how can I explain better to my students the rules to be fun and not to be only some things they need to follow. And I was thinking that, yeah.
Yeah, this is a very good point. May I ask you, because I like this question or topic quite a lot. So we have here an interesting thesis, right, from Valentina. So if students are against rules in some way, so how we can kind of trigger them maybe to like it a little bit more. I already gave the anecdote as your best friend, right? So they're not your enemy best friend, but maybe let's think it's not enough. Maybe we need something new. Can we think about something else which could be interesting too?
Yeah, I was thinking exactly as you said, of a story, and we are explorators in a jungle, for example, and we need to have like the rules would be our map to finish the trip, and something in this area, the story one. I think it would work for my kids.
Interesting is do we know, I mean, the people who are against rules, will they be convinced by this nice story?
Maybe kids. I'm not sure.
To be honest, because I think it's very good what you're doing, but I think the children who love stories and like this, but they're normally also not against rules. So I think you're providing here the group which is already with you. They will love your lessons, they will love your stories, but that's already the group who is more or less accepting you as a teacher and as a guide and so on. I think that normally the people who are a little bit more obstructive, they needed to normally a little bit less kind approach. But of course, we don't want to be evil. But we can be a little bit tricky, right? Tricky is fine. Because, I mean, chess is a game. So as long as we play a little bit with the elements, I think it's fine. So what happens is that we play a game and the people don't like rules, right? So then I take an extra set of pieces and I just put an extra queen on the board. And then you say that's unfair, right?
Yeah.
And then it says why you think it's unfair, right? You didn't like rules. So if there are no rules, I can put extra queens, right? Because, or suddenly you like rules. So what is it? Do we like rules or we don't like rules? So, I mean, it's a little bit like, I mean, this is one example, right? So what I normally do is I try to be tricky and I try to kind of make the fun element where I kind of make the rules that they say, but now this is unfair because you're breaking the rule. Because of course, there are so many ways how we can break rules and then it's not fun anymore. And I'm just showing them that the rules are not only in their disadvantage, the rules are also in their advantage. They protect them. They give a safe area. They give that the game has a fair outcome. They can control the outcome in the way. So by doing it is I can, how normally you can have long discussions, but normally these kind of things help much better. Just put them a little bit and tease them a little bit. And then they come back and they're kind of correcting you for breaking the rules. And the interesting thing is that what we call this, does somebody know in communication how we call this kind of technique?
The breaking rules method.
Passive aggressive or aggressive passive?
It could be. It's like contra. It's like the contra. Well, the contradiction or the contra technique, right? It's like you take the opposite side. I had, for example, also another student. He didn't want to do exercises in the step books, right? Or any exercises, right? Or any homework. And then he was really, I mean, it's a little bit like how it happens with children. They're laying on the ground and then screaming and so on and so on and so, making drama and getting attention, right? So of course, what to do? I mean, I was in a house and the mom was just upstairs working and I was supposed to do this and there was some kind of nanny, but I mean, of course, what's supposed I'm to do? So you can pay a lot of attention in it. I mean, it was not the first lesson. It was already lesson number 15 or something like this. So we already... So at some point I was thinking, okay, what should I do? And actually, to be honest, I was that day a little bit pissed. I was really not in the very good mood. So I definitely was not in the mood to convince him. So I said, do you want to play chess or not? And he was kind of not reacting. And then at some point I said, okay, you don't want to do the book. I will work in the book. Because I was thinking, at least I like these exercises. And the interesting thing, then he was looking at, but you're not paid to work in my book. And I said, well, I was not paid to babysit you on the ground either. So, and I like to make exercise. So if you don't want to do them, I will do them. That was not the reaction he was expecting. And he was saying, but you're supposed to teach me chess. Well, you don't want to learn chess. So why should I teach you chess if you don't want to learn? But that's still, you're paid for me giving lessons. I said, okay, let's do it like this. I make the exercises, but I will make some mistakes and you need to correct me. So you don't do the exercise because you don't like it, clearly. But I like them really quite a lot. So I will make them, but I will make some mistakes and you need to correct me. Okay, I will correct you. So then I was making this kind of exercises and he was correcting me. And while correcting me, he had a big imagination and he make a story. So every time I make a mistake, then I was, I don't know, he made some kind of man and the man was kind of dressing up and he came out of the cave and if it was wrong, he goes the other way around and he make a very big story about it. And of course, the whole hour we worked in the book and everything was fine. I'm not saying it's easy and I'm not saying I'm that creative every single time, but sometimes you just understand that when a child is really kind of obstructive in a way where you feel like all the nice and positive words are not helping, sometimes it helps just to do the completely opposite. Because these kind of children, it's like also in the psychology, they have a lot of experience. They know exactly how the teachers react. Because normally when they do it with you, you can imagine they do it in school as well. And in school, they do it much more often. So keep in mind that they are normally experts in this kind of behavior and manipulation, because let's be honest, it's of course, is a mark of attention. So what you can do in techniques is try to do the opposite. And make it a little bit, and of course, you need always to keep in mind that as soon they switch back, then make the joyful element, right? Always forgive them. Don't take it personal, like they're not against you. They have, sometimes it's just they are upset about something. Sometimes it happens something in school. Sometimes it's just, I don't know. In some way, anything can happen, right? They're just human beings. But with children, and you get childish behavior. Normally with adults, you normally see some kind of, foundation, but with this, so that's maybe also something like this you can play with, right? You can play with the idea that to try to say the opposite. Very often also when for example, a student maybe is a little bit in a demotivational phase, right? I mean, they lost a lot of games, maybe a lot of not a lot of confidence. Eva, how would you react to such kind of student, right? It's a little bit opposite. Like really those kind of students need just a hug and just a little bit supportive words. How would you do it? Please unmute yourself, please.
Usually what I do? Usually I let the actually team away, and I am starting to talk about something else. What in what team I can see that he's interested in, and so on. I try to go back to my first team, and usually it works. I mean, I can have his attention and can go on with my stuff.
But I mean, it's a little bit like, I mean, they're just disappointed, right? It's not against you. It's just like they lost. Maybe they played a very bad tournament, or maybe they're just in a period where a lot of bad things happened, and just you see that their confidence in themselves is gone, and they don't feel any progress. They feel like they're working quite a lot, and nothing is happening. Their rating is not going up. I mean, all the
we start to do something that another game or something, maybe not necessarily chess, something different. In what I know that he's very good and he can win, he can feel much better, not to be so much disappointed.
Yeah, very good point. Thank you. Alice, can I ask you, what would you do?
Yes, sure. Can you hear me? Like,
yeah, sure.
Usually I will overall try to promoting kind of like a positive mindset. That is like a fundamental rules for me. And secondly, I will be moving towarding to analyzing the games with the students. And if I couldn't, then I will ask my colleague together with me, try to find out what is the losing patterns for the students. And this actually helps because then they are not focused on losing or winning, but instead they are focusing on learning what is they supposed to learn from the lose. Yeah. So
exactly. This is something very important, right? I mean, always try to focus on the learning, because normally when students are stuck, what does it mean? I mean, because we are talking today about a little bit about the concept, right? And how you can write a development plan. So when students are stuck, what does it normally mean?
Actually, it means that they are lack of certain techniques or tactics in their mindset.
But comparing to, because that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Comparing to what?
Compared to the professionals or
the goals. No, their goals. So the goals comparing to their knowledge and skills, they're not aligned.
Yeah.
And as soon that is not happening, then demotivation. Because what does the word mean, Tatiana, motivation? Or demotivation?
That you don't have motivation, like that it's sunk.
But I mean, you know the root, right? And in Spanish, we have the same. What's the root of motivation? The Latin root.
I don't understand the question.
I mean, the word motivation, where it comes from. What's the root of the word?
From a Latin word, I guess.
Yeah, it's like movere. And what does it mean?
Something with movement?
Yes, movement, right? So to movere comes from movement, right? It is in English, we have still the same root. So it means that he's not moving anymore. The person is not moving anymore. So motivation comes from this word that he is not capable of moving anymore. Why not? Because the skills and knowledge are not aligned anymore with the goals they want to achieve. It's too big. Normally, it's always too big. Sometimes with high gifted kids, it could be that they're too low motivated because the exercise is too easy. But for most of the people, they're stuck because they want to work on their ceiling and not on the basement. and on the foundation. And always very important that when you want to work with students and they're in the phase of demotivation, always start working on their foundation to make it stronger. Because whatever difficult phase you are, if the foundation is not strong enough, there can never be a building on top. If the ground is too soft, too weak, then there can never be built a building, right? So always quite interesting again that you see the root of the word more or less explains what we're talking about, right? So yeah, so we talked about all about connection, and I think that's also something I want to show you, because today we have, well, we had a quite big program, but also I see that we are a little bit with less people than expected, which in some ways is good, because then it means that we can really answer all your questions and go through it and have a lot of personal, well, kind of feedback. So how to develop yourself as a trainer, right? This is the first part of our session. And I think learning is actually probably the one of the basic things which I consider as most important for myself as developing myself. Of course, knowledge is important. I mean, if you have too little experience as a chess player, it's very difficult to become a real good trainer, because I mean you need some experience at least in some way, because it's very difficult to explain something you haven't faced yourself. That's also why I think that for me, for example, I feel I'm very confident to bring everybody to IM. When it comes to Grandmaster, I have some idea. I can grasp absolutely some idea what's needed, but I immediately will say, go to Grandmaster and ask him, right? I mean, I didn't become a Grandmaster for a reason. I made one Grandmaster norm. I think that my knowledge in some way is quite good, but I feel that on top of 2,500, I said, okay, go to somebody with 2,700 and ask them what's upstairs, right? I mean, he can guide you. And I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine. I brought 50 players to this level, and then I said, okay, then my task is done, right? I mean, you're always welcome for a cup of coffee or tea. We can have a nice conversation, but when it comes to chess, you need to go to the big guys. If you want some guidance about general development, you can always tell me what to do, and I can think, because of course, I'm an analyst and I'm didacticus, so I can always make a plan for you what probably is most likely good. But when it comes to knowledge, you need a stronger player than me. I'm not good enough. And I think this is also very important, that you just make your limitation where your kind of core field or core group is. In beginning, I had a trainer who was not that strong, and he always wanted to train everybody far above his strength. And that always gives you troubles, because then the authority is gone. And actually also for the players, you're not doing him a favor. And I think in the end, whatever happens, the player is the one you want to serve, right? Of course, you understand you have a business as well, but we always need to think about, I think in long term, it always will pay off that you're just honest to everybody, because they will talk to other persons in a good way about you. If at some point you try to train above your strength, then normally they will become disappointed, or maybe some argues, or at some point it will not work anyway, but then they will talk differently about you. Because I feel limit yourself to a certain group, will specialize yourself, and normally that is your strength and not your weakness. And I think that's also something important, because people always say, well, who do you want to train? Everybody. Well, it's a little bit like a shop, right? I mean, I give you two shops, one shop who sells everything and one shop who sells only one specific product. Where would you prefer to buy or to ask for information? The specialists, normally you feel much more comfortable, because they know exactly what this product's about. I don't care about all the products. Okay, if it's a supermarket, this of course is pleasant, but then you don't care about all these questions, right? Because you know what to buy. But if it's about a project like a very specific, you just want experts. So the same, in my opinion, is limitation yourself. Scarcity is also very important about creating yourself a spot. Try not to be everybody's trainer, but to try to be somebody's trainer or some groups of trainer. I think this is also one of the important lessons I learned in time. And of course, in the beginning, it's very difficult maybe to figure out, but try to understand it in long term. That's the only way how, you can make your decisions. So one thing is always try to, learn, like you're today. If I may be honest, I still find it in some way quite interesting that I know a lot of female trainers in Europe, but there are only 8 participants here today. And in my opinion, that's one of the key things where I think that the understanding is they say, but I need to work or I have something else to do, but there are not so many webinars which are even for free. And you can learn from a more or less expert. I can understand there are a lot of other experts as well, but these kind of things, in my opinion, are very vital in your development. I always obtained every single class. Still now, after, I'm already 25 years, but still, if the federation give me any webinar, I'm more or less always following it. And you can say, why should I? Shouldn't I know everything or whatever? I still feel that if you take the approach that you know everything and that you're too good to kind of follow these kind of things, that's the moment where you probably will be outdated within in a very short time. I think that the modesty, and I think that, for example, also another thing, I spent, I think systematically since 2014, I'm learning languages. And does somebody know why I'm learning languages? Or can anybody understand why? Alice?
Yeah, actually, I think I could partially feel that why, because I'm also learning a new language, which is German. And I think that will opens up your completely different logistics system, logically thinking in your mindset, how you set up the beginning and the ending of the sentence that might influence how you putting down the strategy towarding European players. Because for me, I'm from China, so I noticed that the Asian players are playing a little bit different from my point of view compared to the European players. Or maybe for you, it's a huge difference. But for me, right now, I only see on my level, it's not so much. But yeah, I guess that's partially of the reason.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And also keep in mind that I want to be the student. I want the feeling of helplessness. I want to have the feeling that you ask for this 10th time on the teacher. Shit, I should have nodded, but I forgot, right? Because that's what is happening. You feel this modesty that you feel, because the point is that the longer you train, the more you feel like, I know this, I can do this, right? And you're on this iron tower somewhere upstairs, and the students, they feel weak. And I feel like if you ask your teacher for the 10th time, could you please repeat it? Because I know that I should supposed to know it, but I forgot about it, or it's just difficulty. It's difficult. Then that kind of feeling you want to bring with you to the table when you're teaching, this modesty. Because we all know that if you're sleepy, or if you're maybe not in the best mood, or maybe not in the best month, or not in the best period of your life, for whatever reason, then you're not producing or productive in the way of learning. But sometimes continuing also, you see that what things happen over time. Because I also noticed I always kept on going learning. I never skipped it, never. Even at the times I was not really learning. Because the point is, I know that these periods don't make the difference. The difference will be in the moments where I have the energy, when I have the power of learning. And then I would just to continue, right? And that's also the power of duration and the power of learning. And I feel that especially the modestness in your teaching, students feel it. They feel it, and exactly, and you know exactly, because I can say, well, last week I wanted to quit as well, but I didn't. I can tell you the anecdote, and I can tell you exactly the feeling why I felt like this. Something, and I always say that languages are, the good thing with chess is that chess is more or less fair. If something is not correct, we change it. Language normally doesn't change it. They have a lot of exceptions. They have a lot of unfair rules. They have a lot of which just happens by the culture or by the history, and it just they just happen like that, right? Chess normally is fair because we have this kind of objectively notion in chess, and we just change it. We can easily say, okay, if it doesn't work today, or the engine said this move is better, okay, we change it, right? In language, you can't do it. So I feel also in some way, we feel that, chess is in some way this luxury of being able to change. But I feel one more time, to find your way of learning something new. I have learned twice a language from scratch. And why learning from scratch is so important is because this modesty will dawn to you in the best way. Because if you learn something, I mean, for example, I can assure you that if I would learn Chinese, I will be desperate, right? You're searching for structure, you're searching and you're thinking about all this, the 2,600, no, it was, the best was like 26,000, right? Signs, if I remember well, the top speakers. And if you imagine that that's the top speakers, right? And if you only this modesty, and then I understood also the different Cantonese and Mandarin, they have this small difference, and then everything, right? So immediately you understand that when you want to learn something like this, it's so tough. But if you imagine how much knowledge we need for chess, Adina, also you should know, right? I mean, if you imagine what you have learned over time, you understand how tough it will be to start. I mean, who would you advise to start learning chess, right? I mean, it's just.
And still, you know, we never finish learning.
Exactly. I mean,
other openings, other variation, other things, something in an ending. It's all the life you are learning anyway.
Yes, right. And I think that's also something. So one of the things, so always try to take something for yourself. So one thing is, of course, well, I mean, just study books, study all kinds of good literature, really try to learn from the best players. I also feel like talk to a lot of players, right? I mean, over time, I spoke always to all the trainers all the time. I don't know how many trainers you have spoken to in the last couple of months, but if you feel like it's less than 5, maybe that's something you need to think about more. Try to make a structure of learning by talking to people who you think they are capable of telling you some good things about chess. And it doesn't matter what. But always try to take. I mean, for example, nowadays, I mean, when I was, it sounds always so stupid when you say when I was young, but I mean, let's be honest. If this book, and I can show you just a small, you see, I have all these books, and in my time, we had maybe 20 books, right? That's it. And if you imagine that now this full room is full of books and everything, right? So there are so many books these days, and it's all about stories about good, great players. For example, Yarmolinsky, he wrote The Road to GM, right? And improvement of chess, what was it? Road to Chess Improvement. And of course, it's very American. And you can say, I don't like it. It's a little bit American story. First, he is small, then he's a champion and big victory and blah, blah, blah. But okay, on the other hand, if you skip this kind of emotional part, he still tells some interesting way how he managed to get there along the way, which kind of things he used to. For example, how in the game he was analyzing that he understood that every phase in the game has some kind of strength and weakness, and that you have to feel also how you're playing in the game. And even the small constructions, I always take out. I always try to preserve them as something in my mind, because I feel like, of course, I have maybe some part I don't like that much, but I try to take out some of the concepts where I can build myself as a trainer and understanding how I can provide my students in a better way. And I think that every book has these kind of concepts. So let's go through. Eva, what is your best chess book where you feel like you learned something from? Let's go. Everybody take one book, and let's see together which book did we read.
Ortis Lajos, 600 Endgames.
Wow. And what do you like the most about it, or what is your profound point where you feel like you can help us? Or I mean, that's a little bit like this is your gift to us, right? You know something, I don't know some. Well, I know he exists. I know it's a famous Hungarian grandmaster. But okay, so what do you take from him?
Okay, it was one of my first endgame books I learned from, and I kind of understood a lot of those positions, and I saw that every student I had, they also understood that book. Okay, now are a lot of other endgame books, Dvoretsky and so on, much better maybe, but for Hungarian pupils, maybe it's much understandable.
I can understand it. I mean, Max Euwe is our world champion, right? And normally he's also probably not the best book writer or something, but it's in Dutch and he's world champion. So I don't know. In some way, you can be a little bit nationalistic, right? I mean, just and it's also part of the culture, right? I mean, Portis was a memorable person, right? A great grandmaster as well.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I am not a very nationalist person, so it looks like very funny from me to say that this is my favorite chess book, but somehow got me. I really cannot explain.
Thank you. Okay, Alice, what's your best book?
For me, I started with the Chinese book at the very, very beginning. And now, actually, I haven't found, or I haven't bought any books in German with my chess for improving. But I know the fundamental chess book in China, which they translated directly from one of the player. It's called Jose Capablanca. I don't know if you heard about this book before. It's Chess Fundamentals.
Yeah, Jose Capablanca.
Yeah, and that was my very first book, basically, how I started. And that's also guiding me through how I would teaching the students with the fundamentals.
If I may ask, there's a Chinese book of one of the first Chinese player who beat the European. I'm sure the school of Chinese. What was this? The Chinese school.
His last name is Ding. I guess that's a
guy. But actually, the Chinese school is actually quite interesting. Of course, it was a little bit as an kind of analog to the Russian chess school.
They have a specific school.
But what I liked about it is that they had a complete program how you can do it, or at least how it was done in China, right? And probably it's not, well, it's a little bit outdated now because it was more than 25 years old. I think the book was sold, but still, I think it is quite interesting. Are you aware of this book or not really?
I didn't know about this book. Could you maybe share in the chat about the book name? Maybe that would be interesting for me to read.
Let me see if I quickly can find it. If not, then I will. This is the disadvantage of having too many books. Then it's just difficult to find it. Yeah, I will.
Or you can just share the book name after our webinar.
Yeah, I was just hoping that I can still grasp it quite quickly, but if not, then I will.
I will take a note.
I will share it later on. So I will share it later. So anyway, what is quite nice is that this is also a little bit of cultural book, and I think culture also is quite interesting. Yeah. So I will share this book later on. I find it. Thank you, Valentina. What was your?
Yeah, I was trying to find my best one, but I can't really say about it. But I remember I was searching some books to help me teaching chess for my kids in schools, and the most recent one was a Romanian one. I'm from Romania, and it's a pretty old one actually. It's called in Romanian something like let's learn methodically chess, something like this.
Yeah.
And I liked it because it was simple explained as I could explain for my kids. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how to say it, but I liked it because of the simple explaining of everything.
Yeah, the clearness and the easiness
Yeah.
of the structure of the lesson.
Yeah,
Okay.
the structure,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, thank you. Tatjana, just
Yeah, I still have my favorite book. It's in Spanish, but it's like Learn Chess from John Nunn. And yeah, I learned to play chess in school. We had scholastic school chess, classic chess. But afterwards, I stopped a couple of years, and then I got this book as a recommendation to start again. And even though it covers the basics to a bit more a difficult level, I think it was well, it explains it very well. And I also knew some things about John Nunn, so I looked up a bit to the author of the book, and that also helped me a bit to enjoy it more, because it's a bit also a personal book. Like, he writes a lot about the way he sees the things and the way he would approach a chess problem. And I felt that was a personal way of writing a book, so I could identify on a good level with it. And that's why I always would say this is my favorite book, because it created sort of a personal thing to chess.
okay, nice. Thank you very much. Ferriti, when I'm pronouncing it correctly. Just, so you need to unmute, please.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm a little
Hi.
bit worried I've joined an hour late because CET is not quite the same as GMT, and I'm very sorry if I am an hour late. I can't tell, but anyway, I joined at my
You're
1
more than
o'clock.
welcome, but yes, we started, and fortunately we are recording it, so you can always
I can go back and watch the first hour. Yeah, I don't think I have really a favorite book. I have some books, but I think that the authors that have inspired my teaching in schools, and I teach in primary schools, so I'm not teaching to a particularly high level. But Michael Basman, who is an international master, he wrote a lot of books which are at beginner to intermediate level. And I found those really useful in schools. And also John Nunn has written a lot, but I liked his sort of problem solving. So slightly different to chess, you know, the chess problems and solving. Which I actually really enjoy doing myself. So that side interests me.
Thank you. What is maybe quite nice to know is that Rita Atkins from Hungary, she also made a lot of mathematics and chess, and she made several webinars, which I definitely can advise. She's a very good colleague of mine as well. I had several conversations also with her, and she has also some kind of mini game where you can make this kind of exercise with mathematics as well. So if you like this part where John Nunn is also very famous for, and then maybe that's also a nice area to find something.
I find also with the problem solving ones is that the children in chess club, they enjoy making puzzles. So mate in 1, mate in 2, mate in 3, and so that and I feel that really gets them thinking. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just let us also, because a little bit of the time management, so what we had is that improving yourself as a chess player, I think, is also very important. So always try to learn from others, read books. I will make a short list with books where I think they are quite interesting for you also as a chess player, right? So mainly so from so there are just a couple of them. And another point is like you need to develop yourself as a human being. I think that's also get experience. I think because most of my students or they went through all kinds of phases, especially when you are about adults. Of course, I understand that children in school, they is different. But I mean, especially when you're training adults, they just go through a lot of well, things in their lives as well. And the more experience you have them with yourself, you understand much better how to support them or how they probably feel appreciated also in this point or supported. So that's the second point. Yeah, and so get experience, read books, play tournaments, get experience also from the tournaments, and always try to reflect on yourself, right? Because that's always the most important thing, is that if you can't reflect on yourself, how will you help your students, which you also ask to reflect? So learning the reflection point of view is, of course, always confronting, but always, in my opinion, vital for any development and any learning. So that's another point. When we are looking to these two first points, are there any specific questions? So let's go through them all so that we all finish everything before 3 o'clock, because we have an afternoon program as well. So let's go through. So are there still any questions about these first two things which I didn't cover yet, or you wish me to elaborate a little bit more on or give you some tips? Valentina? Yes.
Yeah, I was trying to create my question.
Yeah.
About the development chess plan, is there a chess program at the mondial level? I don't know.
I think that I mean when we are talking about, because you give a lot of lessons in schools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel that, I mean, the easiness of the step method is, of course, very clear, because the good thing is that you start from 0 to 2100. And that's more or less, you don't need to think about it, you just need to follow it more or less. Of course, the step method, of course, has also a little bit their flaws or maybe some shortcomings, or maybe you can say you can add some value as a trainer. Normally, I never find it very discouraging to add something to the step method, because I feel like that's also the reason why I exist. Otherwise, the step method would be sufficient and I can find another job, right? So if I have nothing to add to it, then there's no purpose of being or existing as a trainer. So in one way, you need, well, I mean, there's always what we already discussed. We have the selling point, right? We have our stories, we have our personality and everything, what you bring to the table. But I feel that also discussing games, like we said, analyzing games, trying to understand where the student kind of is stuck in their game and what will be the next step, in my opinion, is also very vital about making a development chess plan. Another thing is that these theoretical concepts are quite important. One of the two books I'm quite happy about it is like they're the Street Smart and from what was his name? I forgot. Street Smart and I can't find them quickly. There are two books about. And he wrote down a lot of theoretical constructions. And I think about it, it's very important also for you as a trainer to make your constructions how you want to teach calculation techniques, because the step method, of course, is only teaching you more or less how to use pattern recognition and how from searching strategy you can make every problem from bigger to smaller. But for example, calculation techniques, the step method is not doing anything. So that's something you need to add. Books of Ramesh is good. Books from Agard are good. This name of street chess. There. Let me wait. Oh. Actually, there are 3 books. Axel Smith. That was Pump Up Your Rating. It's one of them. I will make pictures later on, right? I mean, so never worry that if you didn't write it down. Street Smart Chess is also by him. He has a lot of structures. The woodpecker method actually is also not that bad, but what's a little bit, because this is also a very popular book.
Yeah.
Somebody knows this book?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So in general, this is very popular and people say this is a very good book. Do you know what his main key point is of learning? If you practice and memorize a lot of exercises, you will become good. Well, I mean, of course, that's the whole point. If you remember everything, then of course we understand we're good. We are lacking time, and that's of course not. So in the step method, of course, pattern recognition is done not only by pattern recognition, by repetition, but also by a set of questions, right? So in my opinion, the woodpecker book is not so bad, but I see it as more exercises to the step method and not, you need to still the step method because you need the questions, right? To make any problem smaller. So one thing is to understand the difference between pattern recognition or some kind of smart, intelligent solving and calculation techniques. So for example, that's a very concrete technique which you need, for example, with calculation. The difference is also between positional and strategy. Does anybody know the difference between positional play and strategy? Because in my opinion, many books, they don't make the difference. Even Agard, one of the most famous book writers, in my opinion, he's not very accurate in his wording. Does anybody know the difference between positional and strategy? So positional play and strategic play. Tatjana?
There is always this quote like tactics or tactical plays, like to know what to do when there is something to do, and positional play, like to have a plan when there's nothing to do, to build up a plan. So someday or on a certain time you will have something to do. Something like that.
That's some kind of interesting way of describing it. I think it's maybe easier. I mean, if, for example, I mean, I'm an organizer of the, let's say, a big festival or something like this. So what is the strategy in organizing a festival event?
Like finding first allocation, catering people.
I mean, when we're talking about strategy, it's never concrete. It's about, I want people to make them happy. I want, I don't know, I want to give a certain knowledge to the people. I want to give them a certain experience. I want to give them something, okay, general, right? Then, of course, there's nothing organized, but then you start organizing, and that's positional play. So then you're saying, because if it's concrete, it becomes positional. If it's not, then it's strategy. Strategy, you can never phrase in something you can do. Positional play, you can. That's the whole difference. For example, if Bill Gates said, I want a computer in every home, do I know as a seller what to do? Not really, but if I'm selling a computer, then I'm, wait, what's happening here? Okay, somehow it changed. So I don't know what to do, but if I'm selling, then I'm participating on the bigger strategy, right? So every time I sell a computer, or if I sell 10,000 computers and I have 10,000 people in my village, then I know that I'm kind of covering this broader strategy. So always keep in mind that positional is the execution of the strategy. So what is tactics?
Positional.
Tactics is always in the first place. No. The tactics is always in the first place. Is of course the goal of the game. But it's also the goal of any strategy. If your strategy doesn't end with a material gain or mate, then what is your strategy worth? Right? You always need, your strategy needs always to be aimed in the end by gaining material or mate. So always keep in mind that the tactics is always pure, the calculation techniques, which we covered before. It's always like the goal of any strategy, and it is the justification of any positional execution or action you want to do, right? Because positional play without tactical justification is nothing. So you see that the tactics, they are in three ways in our game. So to understand, that's always something very vital, right? I mean, very important also to distinguish. So sometimes students are very good in tactics on the first level, but they are very bad on tactics on the second level. Like, for example, they cannot connect the strategy to a certain material gains or certain weaknesses. Or sometimes they are not very good to combine positional play with a lot of calculation, because positional play is overall thinking, is wording. That's like, again, language. And some people like to think globally, but they're not very good in concrete actions, how to justify their actions. So also, again, you see that, and some people, they are good in making these plans, and they are very good in calculation, but they cannot combine them because the complexity of combining can be struggling. So again, what we are doing is that we always try to make these building blocks, and then we try to understand where in the whole process the students are weak or stronger, or where there can be kind of flaws and how you can smoothen the process. And that can be, of course, already from the very small level, but it can also be on the very complex level when they're much stronger. I know that this is maybe a little bit abstract, but that's, of course, what strategy is about, right? It's all about this kind of bigger picture. And I find it quite important that in the end, at least you need to have some idea that this is what chess is all about. And I always tell it a little bit like, it's a little bit like being a for example, when you start chess, you're just like a self-employed person, right? In the end, you just need to have your money, and that's the goal of your business. But when you're, for example, Apple, you don't aim for revenue and money, you just aim for market share. It's already abstract, because this market share will represent your gain, which you will make in the end. Right, so also think about that in the beginning, everything is very concrete. Like in the beginners, they always try to take material, right? And later on, it becomes more abstract. So also keep in mind that that's the process we are going through. And the further you go in chess, the more abstract thinking we need to take into our considerations and thinking. Are there any unclarity about this part? I understand this may be much, but feel free to ask any clarity or questions, or maybe consequences for your teaching, because that's maybe more important, right? Because we are making this development chess plan. So in my opinion, what I do, Valentina, is that I try to always think about every part where I feel this is vital for every student to know. And then I'm trying to understand how I can train it. And you always train one part first completely, so they are completely capable of knowing this part, and then you go to the next one. So that's also something very important. And I always try to think that every part needs their own theoretical structure or instruction. And building this over time is one of the first things we need to do as a trainer or teacher. And it doesn't matter how strong the students are, right? Because even on the lowest level we have. And the good thing about the step method is that most of these instructions are written down. So you don't need to invent them all yourself. You can just copy them. Copy paste is always the easiest way in the beginning. Later on, maybe you can have some more own individual uniqueness to bring into your lessons. But in the beginning, it's always good and easy just to copy. We discussed a little bit the books, the tools. So what about the tools? I think that, for example, especially in the beginning, I really like Lichess in a couple of ways next to chess.com. Of course, they're all kind of learning website as well. But what is good about Lichess is that it's there are some kind of tools where I can share like this. Wait, it's not good.
In the Learn, I'm using this also.
Sorry. Yeah. So so what for me is important is, for example, one of the things I use the most most often is this coordinate games. I don't know if you're aware of it, but I mean, especially every beginner can't recall the coordinates, right? And this game is even this old man, he was already 60 plus, and within 1 week, he more or less already was capable of learning all this. He was just playing this almost every day. And then what you do, of course, is in the beginning, you do without time. Can anybody tell me why we do this exercise without time in the beginning? And why we do always first find squares and then naming squares and with time? Why didactically this is important?
They would feel pressed about time.
Yeah, exactly. So what you do with learning is you want to learn them one thing at a time. Time is an extra element, which is important, but they only do it when they are capable of defining the squares. So you always need to understand that everything in chess or in learning, everything what is an element, you try to include or exclude. In the beginning, you do always the smallest thing you can do. If they're capable of doing, you add one extra thing. If they are capable of doing, you add another thing. And that's how you build them up. But you never go faster than your student. And then you always go in the right way. That's always the good thing. In the beginning, I was thinking that I have this plan and I want to do this with my student and that. And in the end, and actually the last years, I kind of I'm just following the student, because the student, of course, I need to understand where more or less want to go with the student. But in the end, the speed of the student is determine what I want as a trainer. Because the student is not for me to exist. I exist for the student to exist. And I want them to make progress, right? And if it goes in whatever pace it goes, that's where you want to be, right? And then you just add things. So first, without time, only white, find square. And if you want, I always do first the coordinates, right? Because it's easier. If they're capable of doing it, I switch them off. And also naming squares where you need to write is more complex than a thing square, and just click. Sorry, Zoom crashed. Just sorry. Yeah, so this is the screen, right? It's not working. Okay. So this is one website I really like. What I also like is when you play a game, is that you have this is that here you have the lobby and where you can find students, right? So one of the things is also good about this is that they can find the opponent they want to play, and here in the mode you can kind of, well, do anything you want and in the race you want, right? So what is very good is that they can really determine who to play. In chess.com, you get an opponent more or less, and also the time frame. Here you know exactly what to play. What I also like quite a lot is that they have this send mode. In chess.com, you have this send mode where if you it's when you play, I need to play, but that's not working. So you have the send mode where you can exclude every distraction. Right, so this is also important when you're playing chess. I need to click, unfortunately, on so I don't want to play again. But that's when your Zen mode is more or less when you can exclude it. When you play, you can see it. It's just and then it removes all these things at the side. Then I like also quite a lot the puzzle storm. Why the storm is because this is a little bit competitive already. You have the 3 minutes, but it just do it as a little bit like in the end or something, like to make a playful exercise. I remember that one of the questions was how to kind of make a differentiation in lesson, especially when it's online. I think that this kind of thing can be very good in the beginning or in the end, because it's just a playful element where you kind of well, you can see what they're already capable of doing, but keep in mind that the level is quite difficult already. So here they really need to be able to do already something. If you say they're really not good and you're really they're really in the very beginning, then normally what I do is then I go to chess.com, because in this way I like just to go more, is that here you have this kind of topic or thematic puzzles where you can choose, right? And here you have the range. So what is very good about this range is that you can even do 200 to 400, right? So it's very beginning, so imagine. And you can also select all the topics you want. So what I normally do is that I select, well, either if you have lesson, you can choose one topic. Again, this is not for instruction. Normally, this is more about to have a playful working form extra next to the lessons which you're already giving. One more time, I'm really in favor of the step method when it comes to the basic, or any method which kind of give a clear instruction on any topic. But if they are capable of doing such a topic, then you can make a little bit like a mix, like, for example, attacking king, basic checkmates, mate 1, 2, 3, and the mating net. So why this is quite good for us, that I select, let's say, 6 topics and not 1. Why do we think? What's the good thing for us in also when we have group lessons, for example?
So the most advanced students, they don't always find the answer very fast.
I mean, that's also one thing. I mean, but it's also that they really need to figure out, because mating 1, 2, 3 means that it can be anything, right? If it's only mating 3, then they have this fixed. So when they're learning, I take one topic. When they already know one topic or several topics, then I try to mix them to make the next stage, right? So always keep in mind that when they are learning and they're really not capable of doing, you take one topic. As soon they're capable of doing something, then you try to mix them and let them think a little bit broader, because then they need to find their searching strategy, which we are learning with the instruction. They need to help us to guide through these kind of exercises. So what I also like quite a lot is the puzzle rush. But then again, how do you think I like the puzzle rush? You have 3 ways. Which do you think I like the most?
Survival.
Survival, absolutely, without time. Why? Because first they need to be capable of learning and using the strategy. You need to talk with the way how they are solving. And of course, what is very important also, does anybody know this survival mode, or we haven't played it?
Yeah.
Valentina?
Yeah, I played some games there.
Playing some, yes. So what very good. So what is about it is that this is about being attentive, right? Because the point is with survival is like you have, let's say, 9 very easy, like mating 1 pieces, and then suddenly the 10th one is the tricky one. And I always tell them that the first exercise is that we want to be, let's say, 20 flawless, 30 flawless, 40 flawless, or, well, depending on the level, right? So I always make a target that they need to be flawless, because that's what you want. One mistake is not acceptable, because that's when you lose games. So that's what you want them to learn in chess, that they need. We are like the doctor in the hospital. Everybody needs to survive. And one patient died, unfortunately, is not a good result. It's like you want everybody, and so that's the attitude you want to learn them, right? And that's why it's also quite important with the survival. It's about being attentive and focused for a long time. What is the disadvantage about very often this puzzle rush, and especially the Twitch and the kind of YouTubers who are streaming their puzzle rush kind of performances? Do we know? Tatjana?
I think that puts a lot of pressure, especially on beginners, because like we said in the beginning, I think many don't realize that the streamers are there for entertainment, and that they actually practice this for hours and hours at home, like to make a good show. And then let's take young kids, think, oh, but this is like what I should be able to do in a year or so, or I suck at it, and it gives like a completely wrong image of how it really is.
Okay.
And they don't
Yeah,
know
sure.
better.
Yeah, bad impressions, sure. What more? Do we have more other arguments? Because what happens in very often, they would draw lines, right, with their mouse. Do you think, so how do we think about those kind of tools? Are they good for us as teacher in online lesson? For example, I have a board, let's take, and that's also quite nice because somebody was asking how to teach end games when they're very young. Well, let's take one of them. So for example, if I give now an instruction about endgame rook and king mate, right? It's very basic, very profound, let's say. So is it good when I make a lot of arrows?
Is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is good. It is good. It is good. Yeah.
And why is good? Why do you feel this is?
Can I say?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Yes, variety. Yes, please.
Well, like say for example, in this one, you want to help them visualize, if you like, the lines that the rook and the king can have on the board so that they can see where the black king then can't go. So it's almost like you're giving the rook a laser beam with your arrow so that they can actually see what you're trying to do with your rook. And again, I mean, I use lichess, but
So
yeah, you
like
can
this,
circle squares that are going that where you're going. It's I find the arrows useful. Yeah.
So something like this, right? So the king can't go here and he can only go here, let's say.
Yeah.
For example, right? Okay, so what is the difference then Nakamura making puzzle rush and making arrows while he's solving it? Because that's the difference, right? Or the other point when he's when they are playing, they are making all kinds of arrows and in their calculation, especially when it's complicated calculations, and they make all kinds of arrows where the pieces move. So is there any difference with that and this? Tatiana?
That's not didactical at all. They just like very quickly say, and this and take and take and take and take, and we win. But if we do this, we can actually teach something or visualize what we want to teach.
Yeah, exactly. So when it's about instruction, 100% the coloring and is a kind of a supportive tool to use to make your point and to make it visual clear what you want to do. As soon as it becomes calculation, we don't do it because in chess games you can't make arrows. When Carlsen is playing real games over the board, there's no way he can or make with his finger all kinds of movements where the pieces go, right? That's not how it's working. So the point is that these arrows can only be done in the instruction phase, but when you're calculation and you need to do the real visualization, then it stops. Because I have a lot of students, especially when, of course, with the puzzle rush, the little bit the more challenging one, when you're talking, Adina, about this 1200, 1500, that's the level where they're not allowed to make any arrows anymore. They need to be capable of doing calculations themselves. And of course, that's what you need to stimulate, and you need to kind of unlearn them to use this kind of arrows when they would, for example, use it, right? And also, I think that a lot of calculations need to be done over the board because the real visualization doesn't happen on the screen. We know also that that learning and anything, automatization and integration could be very good online and digital. But when it comes to learning and really, especially the initial learning, that's something you need to do physical with the board and with the offline. So in my opinion, that's also the good thing and the bad thing. The good thing about digital is, of course, that distance doesn't matter, right? You can live anywhere where you want and give teachings anytime. Even if you're a little bit ill, you can just let it go, especially after COVID. That was, of course, very important. less travel cost, all kinds of, well, I mean, you're just nearby. Well, I mean, this webinar is also, if we would have met somewhere in Europe, it would have been very costly and very difficult to organize. Now you can just switch on your Zoom. You even, if you're 5 minutes in before the webinar, you can just wake up, take your cup of coffee, and you can be present, right? I mean, these kind of things are completely new world these days. But when it comes to the learning part, always don't forget that the old-fashioned learning way is still very good. And very, yeah. So also here it's quite interesting. We can do a small experiment and see instantly how we can learn. We have 3 terms when it comes in the step method about talking about the functions of attacking pieces in mate. Which 3 terms? Does anybody know them by heart?
When the delivering mate, this one, when you bring the chaser.
Chaser, exactly. The chaser is the one who.
Guard.
Yeah. So who is the chaser? So the chaser is
one who will deliver the mate.
Yeah, deliver the mate or gives the check, right? It can be because if it. What's the guard?
The guard, I think, is the one who defends the square, who controls the squares of escape.
Exactly, the escaping squares, and the helping piece
of the piece who does checkmate. The helper is helping the piece who does checkmate. But sometimes
so it helps the chaser, right? So it's protecting the chaser. Yeah. So the chaser is the one who delivers mate or delivers the check. The guard is the one who protects the escaping squares, and the helping piece is protecting the chaser. Why these terms are important? Because again, this is the first way where students understand that when you want to create a certain thing, and the terms and the concepts are connected to each other. So you're building a complex concepts already for them, because in the first place, we have single concepts. Here, mate is already, you're using several concepts and you need to combine them. And that's also when you're learning about didactically about the first steps, and the step method is there, of course, very refined. We are learning, especially in this way, that first you have single concepts and then you have more complex concepts. So here you see, and this is also what I like, this is a little bit, I call it the hamburger. Hamburger is quite easy. You have, of course, one sandwich and the sausage, and then normally you always keep the king in the middle. That's more or less your aim. So what do we do? First, we bring the guard into place. That's the first thing you need to check. If the guard is in place, we can chase. Now, of course, we need to help, we need to guard, and we need and tempo zug, right? And you, because that's normally you want to work with zugzwang, because then black is forced to play. Again, we can chase, help, guard, tempo. In this way, it's very good because, I mean, of course, I know there's a second mate where the rook is sticking to the king, but the good thing about it that here you really try to emphasize the function of the pieces, and that you try to separate so that you can do more things at the same time. This is important because if you want to learn in chess, very often you have actions where you do things together on one square, and you have actions where you do things separately. It's a little bit like carrying a heavy table. You need to do it with 2 persons. But when you are, for example, doing dishes, one does dishes, another one is drying, and that's normally you do faster when you do everybody separately from each other, right? So trying to let them understand that sometimes tasks need to be, you're stronger doing something together, and sometimes you're stronger when you do something separate. When you talk about transfer knowledge, it means that you bring one knowledge to another one. And of course, rook and king, you can even do it in an easy way. With queen, it's even more. But when it talks about knight and bishop mate, you can't do it without thinking in this kind of functionality. In my opinion, the whole goal of this one is that you can deliver checkmate with knight and bishop. And actually, what is also quite interesting is that the 2 bishops mate is, of course, normally quite easy. But with the knight and the bishop mate, normally the king takes over the function of the other bishop. So thinking in functionality is something very vital in every endgame learning. And in my opinion, also this will help you to play better in the middle game, where also pieces have their own function and everybody needs to take their role in the game. Even if the discussion we had in the opening about London system, where every piece needs to be involved, that's the same kind of discussion, right? Because they understand that if everybody needs to join the party, that's where you start. So again, here, and also quite important, we keep one row in between. Then I give check, and now I switch. Now you have to reverse the board, right? It's a little bit, but still we have the hamburger, king is in the middle, and in this way we make the picture. And then we deliver mate. Guard is doing the work, chasers checking. Everything clear? Or we think so. So that's how we go. Now we go, for example, to some, well, I had one other task, but it was more about concept. So let's do a little bit now together because of the time. So when we take this concept, how we can solve it? Let's try to do it a little bit fast together. So just say it if you find it, but you have to use technique and the right concepts, right? Because that's what it's all about. So Adina, so the first one.
Rook f6, king h8, rook f8 mate.
Okay, so which concept did you use? So how do we phrase them? Because that's the whole point, right? We have the chess part, that's for the smart players. But the concepts is about the one who listens carefully.
You know, this is the waiting move with the rook. I learned it like this when I was
The waiting move, yes, it's the waiting move with the rook. And so the chaser is making the waiting move, then the king moves because the guard is in place, and then I can deliver mate, right? So again, we use chaser, waiting move, and well, okay. So what about the second one? Let's do another one. Alice, what do you do in the second one?
I would say it's similar to the first one.
They're all similar. That's all right. It's not very exciting, but it's just about learning, right? It's a little bit like the technique. So the first move, what do we do here?
So the first move will be moving the rock
to
actually, I'm not sure, but I will just give it a challenge to seize the line. That will be my main concept, but I don't know where I'm supposed to move it. I would just say that
general. I mean, waiting moves always go one backwards because then it can never be stalemate. Also, a very important instruction with students: if they want to make a waiting move, always go one place behind on the same diagonal or the same file.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. I think what I should do is actually moving the king instead of the rock.
What I find important is that in this case, I don't want people to move the king. I know it's allowed, and I know it's again, but the instruction I gave was in such kind of positions, you need to move the rook because the rook is the one who makes the waiting move. Because this is important in all the other end games. Because this is not only about this end game, this will be about all other end games. Waiting moves you do with the pieces, not with the king normally. So what I instruct, here's rook f6, here's rook e6, here's rook e8. Every single time you do the same kind of thing. You want to automate and to integrate the thinking. I know that the king f7 is also mate. That's not the problem. The problem is that here you have choice. When we go to knight and bishop, then very often there's no choice anymore. So if the right way of thinking, it will cause later on difficulties in the learning. And that's why I'm strict in this position.
And actually, my question was that, so how you present to the students, instead of saying, okay, you will be seizing the line, you would say
I like the waiting move.
The move.
So the rook is making, the chaser is making a waiting move by...
okay, so that's, because I was thinking that seizing the line would be the same for the rock. No.
It's about just making the waiting move. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Variety. You had a question before. Be careful. You're mute. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it wasn't so much a question. I was.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to use the word tempo really, just as the waiting.
Yeah, tempo
moves
or
it, yeah.
waiting move. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here you see rook e8. Here you see king to b3. Again, you see it's always the same construction, right? It's this hamburger construction. You just have to look to the bishop, king, and then you have to make the king in between the king and the rook every single time. So here in this position, what do we do?
King c7.
King c7, yeah. If this is difficult for, imagine that, I mean, you can imagine that this is the first position, which is probably very tough. Why this position could be very tough for children or for new learners? Which elements are different from the previous four? Tatjana?
Maybe that we are already in this sandwich position and that now we do have to move the king.
Yeah, I mean, here we also did a little bit the king, but what's the difference with this one? So yeah, the first point is, again, you need to move the king and not the rook. That's one. But what's the, we also had this a little bit here already, but what's the difficulty here?
The direction of the
Direction.
table.
So again, we are turned, but I mean, you see also this is very important. So you need that to switch sides is very important to order to that they are a little bit flexible in the pattern, but also keep in mind the distance. So if this position is difficult, Valentina, what would I do in this position to make the puzzle easier for my student?
To come with the rook closer? Or...
Yeah, I put this rook next to the king. And then I'm asking the same kind of question. If they can solve it, normally I turn the board, let's say a quarter or something, and then I try it again and see if they can recognize. So if they can't recognize like this, I try to recognize it horizontal, right? I just turn sides. So what is kind of important is, again, you see that we have this kind of elements, and from the elements, we are building the pattern. And here is just visual. And the interesting thing is that in the beginning, I had, without this instruction, this page was, well, rather challenging. If you have this visual picture about that the king needs to be in the middle, they make this puzzle in 1 minute and they said, you don't have something more interesting to teach us? And the interesting thing is they don't understand that just the correctness of the teaching makes them solving them so fast. And you can understand that if you do endgames like this is very important. So maybe this is a nice rounding up question, because the question was when to teach endgames. Does anybody has some recommendation or experience? When is a good moment to start teaching endgames? Adina, do you have, oh, sorry, variety, sorry.
Me?
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
Who? Me?
Actually, with the basic endings, I start very early.
Mm-hmm. And why? Because I think it was Valentina, when I'm correct, she was asking that it's very difficult to teach them some end games, right? Or
2 rooks against king. This is the easiest, I think. Or king and queen and rook against king. These are quite easy. Then king, queen against king. Of course, rook, king against king is harder.
But I mean, if you just look to what we did just before, do you think this is fun for kids?
No.
I mean, this made with the king and rook in general is fun because they learn something new very quickly and they have immediately result. So within 50 minutes, they know, now I know it. And of course, they're not frustrated that they are not capable of winning. I mean, of course, it's the beginning, right? And then you just move on the line. Because, for example, I had yesterday also about the square. In the square, you have the same procedure. You make the line. Then, of course, there are 4 ways where you're within. You can still draw. You can plant a tree. You can help with your king. You can be supportive. You can give a body check. Or you can work with multiple zugzwang. Again, also multiple zugzwang is also, again, comparing to zugzwang, right? So that you both are in zugzwang or not. So these kind of instructions are very important every single time. So whatever topic you have, in my opinion, the STEP method is learning us that we always need to have the set of instructions they need to be able to follow. So every child who is stuck and I need to help, I say, what's the first question? What's the second question? What's the third question? And then you get to the answer. And what is most important about this question is that they can always check their own answer. They're asking if the answer is correct or not. I said, you don't need to hear it from me anymore. You have the instruction. With the instruction, you know for sure yourself if everything is correct or not. So I'm trying to build their trust within themselves, because they need to they need to feel that they are the owner of the learning process, and they need to feel the control that they always can get to the answer. And then it doesn't matter if it's endgame or not. But to make it precise of when to start with endgames, I always feel that you just need to look to the games, right? As soon they are not playing endgames themselves, you don't need to explain endgames, because it's not it's not in their mindset yet. But as soon they will kind of survive the opening and they're not mated, and they survive more or less the middle game, that's the kind of moment where you start endgames, because then they start thinking, okay, now I need to know something about the endgame, right? So normally it comes in a very natural pace, I would say. Of course, the mating you need to learn, because otherwise there is no possibility to to end the game. This is of course one of the challenges, and that's also the reason why, for example, in the beginning I never let them play full games, not with the king mate, because they are, then you need to explain the end game. So I play all kinds of mini games where they're controlling the movement of the pieces. I let them all kinds of small skills. I want them to learn how to navigate to a certain square. So why I'm not playing the full game? Because then the end game becomes more important than everything what's around it. So also one of the things is that I try to skip it, is to learn them all kinds of other skills first. And then later on, we make the step. Yeah, so that's also a little bit about this end game. Yeah. A lot of, yeah, thoughts and ways of thinking. Is there any last question before we take our break about this first part? And if not, then use the also maybe what's is always good. This is also something I would always advise my students. Now we have a break, so please switch off your phone for 25 minutes and not think now I have 25 minutes I can work on my phone, because the whole thing is that you have now 2 hours of information in your head. And when you're trying to add information to it, you're destroying your learning process. So the best thing what you can do now is eat something, lay on the couch, do nothing, and let the brain organize all the information you have heard in the last hour, or maybe think about maybe 2 or 3 questions you want to ask, because maybe they're not that clear when you rethink about it. And I know that this doesn't sound like a very good thing, but keep in mind that that's what your students will say as well, right? I mean, they always are on all the devices and so on. But keep in mind that normally the brain is genius. It organizes everything for free for you, as long you use it and you don't disturb it. That's the only requirement of the brain. Sounds easy, but somehow not that easy. Good. I wish you a nice break, and then I'll see you in 30 minutes from now. Okay, thank you.
What do we do?